Well, Jay Spear, or James W. Spear, or Jay as most of us know him, is a graduate of the University of Virginia and of Marshall Wythe School of Law at William and Mary. He joined the Virginia Poverty Law Center in January of 2000, and in 2006, he became the nonprofit's executive director. Under Jay's leadership, the Virginia Poverty Law Center has grown from a small staff of 10 to almost 30 attorneys, paralegals, and administrative staff. He oversaw an organizational restructuring that established the Center for Economic Justice, the Center for Family Advocacy, and the Center for Healthy Communities. A recipient of a number of awards for his work, Jay engages in advocacy before state agencies and the General Assembly on consumer rights issues. Jay also provides training and other support to legal aid attorneys and paralegals, to private attorneys, and to low-income clients throughout the state. He currently serves on the Virginia Coalition of Open Governments Board and is a past board member of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. Most importantly for us, Jay is a longtime and active member of Reveille United Methodist Church here in Richmond. He has his finger on the pulse of legislation and how it impacts matters of justice. I would say that it's not just his job, but his calling. And so we are pleased to welcome you this morning, Jay, and to learn what you have to say to us today.
Thank you, Dwayne. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Now, where's the, can't see the button to do the, let's see, trying to do the slideshow, but I can't see the button to do that. There we go. All right, so the question is everybody seeing that? Dwayne, are you seeing that?
I am seeing that.
Okay, good. All right. So I always look forward to United Methodist Day at the General Assembly because I've been doing this for 22 years. And usually when the General Assembly is in session, I have to go over there most every day. And a lot of people over there are not my friends. So it is really nice to see friends when they come, especially on United Methodist Day. So I really miss not seeing people in person, but thank you for asking me to do this by Zoom. So you're going to get a version of the talk I did for my Sunday school class about two or three weeks ago, but I've updated it. But one thing I always do is, I think most of us know who this guy is. Unfortunately, he died a few months ago. But I have his picture on there because I always like to say a little something about why we should advocate as people of faith. And of course, Archbishop Tutu was the quintessential person who did this. And I found this article on him and these quotes from the article, which I thought were really good. I particularly like his last. Tutu said of his own activism, "I wish I could shut up, but I can't," and I won't. And so I really appreciate everybody being here and not shutting up, just like Bishop Tutu, because it is extremely important. I think, there's so much said in the press and everywhere else about what the Democrats think and what the Republicans think. And when it comes right down to it, what we really ought to be talking about, what is the right thing to do? And what is the moral thing to do? And that is not partisan in any way, shape, or form.
Jay, just so you know, what we're seeing is not the shared slideshow. We're seeing your PowerPoint open. So we're still on the title screen.
Oh, really?
So you might want to just move down the slides on that. I think that's the screen you've got shared.
So you're not seeing the presentation.
We're seeing the presentation, but we're seeing
the whole thing.
Not the presentation version. We're seeing the actual PowerPoint that you have
it's
open.
Showing on my screen.
The tiles.
I'm not sure how to fix that because it's showing as the presentation on my screen. You want to try to do it?
Sure. You want to unshare?
Yeah.
Is that up?
It's up, but it's also on the not on the presentation thing. All right, now it's showing up for me at least. So if you,
You're good.
all right, so if you, next slide, I'll have to tell you next slide, I guess. So that's why I had you do it, because something always seems to go wrong when you're sharing. But you know, the other interesting thing is last Sunday when I was with the youth group, we got into our small groups, and one of the questions we asked the youth to respond to was, who is someone you admired? And one of the youth said, there's Bishop Tutu. And I was really glad to hear that. I was really surprised to hear that, but also very glad to hear that. So next slide, Dwayne. Just so you know, there's a lot of, as you probably already know, there are lots of House and Senate bills have already been introduced, and don't forget the budget. So the legislators have a lot to do in a very short period of time. And for those of us who watch this stuff, there's a lot of bills to look at and a lot of things to try to figure out what things we're going to work on and what things we aren't going to work on. Next, Dwayne. So I just put in here, just so you know, if you're wondering what the Poverty Law Center does, this is our mission statement. We use advocacy, education, and litigation to break down systemic barriers that keep low-income Virginians in the cycle of poverty. And this is our, of course, in January and February, we were heavily into our role in advocacy. Next slide. So housing issues, and what I'm going to do is sort of run through some of the issues that we're working on. Not all the issues we're working on, but some of the issues that I would think people of faith would be most interested in. Next slide. So this is, if those of you who live in Richmond have seen several articles in the Richmond Times-Dispatch about this, in Richmond's largest Latino neighborhood, about the problems they're having. I love this picture because this is Phil Story. He's one of the attorneys in my office, and he's out there at the apartments explaining to people their rights. And I just love the little girl crawling under the table. They don't teach you how to deal with that in law school. But next, yeah, there we go. So this is one of our big priorities this session, try to do something. And there are two bills, that House Bill 802, Delegate Price, and Senate Bill 43, Senator Favola. We want to try to do something about the fact what happens when people are living in unsafe or unhealthy conditions. There already is under the law a way that you can pay your rent into court, but it's difficult for people to do that. It's not an easy process. It's also incredibly intimidating for tenants to try to do this. So this bill tries to create a way for localities to help people get things fixed, and to fix unsafe and unhealthy conditions without the tenant having to go to court and pay their rent into court. Next slide. So another bill that we're working on is, this would be Senate Bill 284, Senator Eben. And what this does is if you're not paying your rent and you get sued, by the landlord to try to evict you, you can raise a defense that the landlord hasn't fixed things. And this is the law in a lot of states, but not in Virginia. And again, we feel like this is a good way that we could get landlords to fix those things that they need to fix. And just in case you're wondering, sometimes the things that our clients face are just huge problems. I mean, if you read those articles about what's happening in I think it's the Southwood Apartments in Richmond, it's very unpleasant. It's not just small things. Next slide. And then we also have some budget amendments that we're pushing for, as when the budget gets considered later on in the session. we'd like to see a long-term rental subsidy program to try to help people. We're asking for funding in both years of the budget to continue providing short-term emergency rental assistance, which that has worked pretty well during the pandemic to try to stem some of the evictions that would have happened. And we would like to see that continued. And then finally, the third thing there is something is new. We actually cooked this up with the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. I think this is it's a pilot. What we're asking for is a small amount of money to have a pilot program or a demonstration program to try to create a first-time homeownership program for families of people denied homeownership opportunities by discriminatory government or government-supported policies and practices. I can go on and on about this, but there's obviously been a very long history of discrimination in this country around homeownership, and this is an attempt to start working on that problem. Next slide. This is the next bill. This is Delegate Price again. Delegate Price is from the Newport News area. For those of you that don't know her, quite a terrific advocate for tenants and safe and fair housing. And so she is carrying this bill for us. But what this has to do with is if you don't pay your rent in Virginia, the law used to be and will actually become the law again unless this bill passes, that the landlord has to give you what's called a 5-day pay or quit. It's a notice saying pay your rent within 5 days, or leave. And if you don't leave, then they file a case to have you evicted. And we got this changed to 14 days, but this was a pandemic thing, and it's going to expire I believe, on July 1st, unless we pass this bill to go back to 14 days. The thinking here is, and I think it absolutely is dead on, is that if somebody hasn't paid their rent, they're not going to be able to come up with it in 5 days. There's a good chance that after 14 days, much better chance that they might be able to come up with the money because they might get paid. And then they have a chance to stay. And really what we all want is less people evicted. It's not good for anybody, landlords and tenants and everybody in the entire community, for folks to be evicted. So anything we can do to stop evictions, I think is a good thing. Next. So moving on to a different area, we've got a couple of bills that have to do with hospital debt collections. And I think when all is said and done, this is going to wind up being the public hospitals, UVA, mostly UVA and VCU and some other public hospitals, to try to, this is just a huge, for our clients, healthcare is huge. Housing, particularly the lack of affordable housing, is huge. And then thirdly, getting saddled with medical debt is just probably one of the top things about, keeping people down and keeping people in poverty. And so this bill is kind of a modest attempt to try to require hospitals to screen every patient, because they all have programs that you can apply for and get your hospital bill paid for, but it's not so easy to access it if you don't know about it. And this bill attempts to make sure that the hospitals screen everyone and make sure that to see if they're eligible for this before they start dunning them for the bill and wind up suing them and maybe even garnishing their wages. Next screen. So this is this Dreams Deferred is the name comes from this reporter from VPM, which stands for Virginia Public Media, Megan Pauley, did this 4-part series, and if you get a chance, take a look at it. It's a radio and a print story, but she was looking into debt affecting thousands of Virginia college students, and it's not federal student loans. It's money owed directly to the universities, and as she refers to it as direct-to-school debt. She explored how this debt is creating problems for people. So we, as a result of this story, and Megan and I actually worked on this together for a long time, and I really applaud the work she did on this. Just a tremendous job finding out about this and interviewing people and things. And so what typically happens, and I've talked to several people former students that this happened to. They start the semester, and for whatever reason, they don't finish the semester. And it could be that they got sick. Maybe their family, maybe somebody in their family got sick. I talked to one lady, her boyfriend was harassing her, and she just simply had to drop out of school to get away from him. And so what happens is then you're stuck with a tuition bill, and because sometimes your loans fall through because you didn't complete the semester, that sort of thing. So, and as you can imagine, sometimes it's small debts. It's just like you didn't pay some sort of fee or something. But for a lot of people, it's just thousands and thousands of dollars, as you can imagine. A semester at most universities is pretty expensive, and it gets turned over. There are three things that typically happen if you can't pay, which of course you can't. That you can get sued by the Attorney General's office, and you can and they can then garnish your wages, or you might they might take your tax refund, or well, the other thing that seems to happen almost always is that the universities withhold your transcript. So what that means is when you try to go back to school, to another school, for instance, we had a young lady come testify on this bill the other day, and what she said was that she went back to J. Sargent Reynolds to complete her degree, and she has to retake, I think she said 6 classes, because she couldn't get her transcript from where she had gone before because they're withholding it. So it really holds people back. And Senator Hashmi put this bill in for us. And I think next slide, Dwayne. Yeah, Senator Hashmi and Edmund put in Senate Bill 159, and it passed the subcommittee 3-1 on Monday. And I think I'm hoping it passed this morning in the Senate full committee. But there's Solana Perkins is the young lady that came and testified. And it holds these students back. We don't think it really leads to many people paying. The United States Department of Education Secretary said that universities should stop doing this. At the moment, we're not getting a lot of pushback from the universities, but they obviously don't like it. And I'm concerned that they're going to try to kill this in the House, because it looks like it's probably going to go in the Senate. But it's going to be an iffy bill, and frankly, and I don't mean this to be nasty or anything, but as a UVA grad, I'm ashamed that they're doing this. Next slide. So this is Senator McClellan's bill, and also I believe Delegate Tran is HB 1012, and it's called Cover All Kids. And nearly 100,000 children in Virginia do not have health insurance. It represents about 4.9% of the Virginians' children under 18. And so the Cover All Kids legislation would help close the gap of uninsured children. The Poverty Law Center has worked on closing healthcare coverage insurance gaps for years and years and years. We spent years getting Medicaid expansion to Virginia, which ended up covering hundreds of thousands of people. And this is sort of the next step. And again, I would have to say, getting access to healthcare is probably the number one thing that keeps people in poverty, is not having access. So next slide. So under family and child welfare, another area that we work on. Next slide, Dwayne. So kinship foster care is something that we've been pushing for years and years. This has to do with kids who need to be removed from their parents' care, can often be placed with, as kinship implies, other family members. But what you have to do is you often, especially in low-income communities, you have to give support, whether it be monetary or other types of support, to the family members who take them in. So we've pushed for this. and because it often leads to a better outcome. It's great if foster care is obviously an alternative, and if you get to it as a great place like United Methodist Family Services, you're in pretty good shape. But obviously other places, other foster care is not so great. Had a lot of personal experience with this at Reveille. We've tried to help a couple of kids who graduated from foster care. And as you can imagine, when you're 18 years old and you're leaving foster care, it's a tough world out there. So anything that can be done to help both of the young ladies we've tried to help have no family or else toxic family ties that don't help them. So if we can get into kinship care, some of these kids into kinship care, their long-term prospects are usually a lot better. Next slide. And then again, more on this issue of placing kids in foster care. There's never really been any guidance about what courts should look at in deciding whether to put kids into foster care. I mean, it's unfortunately, there are times when parents lose kids it becomes an economic thing. They just don't have the money to properly take care of their kids. And there are other things that could be done short of placing kids in foster care. And so we just want to make sure that the courts are looking at this the right way and not taking that step unless it's necessary. And of course, in the child, you always have to look at what's in the child's best interests. Next slide. So nursing homes, this is an issue we worked on forever and ever. The pandemic has certainly exposed problems in this country's nursing homes. And when it comes down to it, it typically is a problem with staffing. And so we have, Delegate Watts has put in a bill for, I don't know how many years, probably 15 years, to try to enforce staffing requirements for nursing homes. And there was a legislative commission that recently recommended minimum staffing requirements for nursing homes. I think it was the Joint Commission on Healthcare. So we are trying to push legislation on this along with many other people. I'm not optimistic about this though, but next slide. Guardianship is another big issue this year at the General Assembly. There's been a lot of media coverage of people who have not been properly taken. Guardianship has to do with, and this is not children, this is adult guardianship. This has to do with a person who, for whatever reason, mental health issues or other disabilities, needs someone to be their guardian as an adult. And Virginia has a process where you can file a case in circuit court and have a guardian appointed for them. But most people are, and this, JLARC recently did a study. Hal Greer is the head of JLARC, and many of you all know him as, I'm not sure if he's still a member, but he was a member of Reveille at one time. And they found that the private system lacks meaningful standards or requirements or accountability to make sure that these adults are being adequately served. Next slide. So I think there have got to be about a dozen bills on this year, trying to implement some of these suggestions from JLARC. But we picked out three things that we think really need to be emphasized. And the first part has to do with public guardians. So there are adults who need guardians, but then there is nobody willing or able to do it. So we have a public guardianship program. So, and these are usually volunteers or agencies, nonprofit agencies that will serve as these people's public guardian. But it needs to be funded. It has to be it's grossly underfunded, and there's a long waiting list for these folks to get these public guardians sometimes. The third thing there is when you need to get a guardian appointed for somebody, what happens is somebody files a petition and then a guardian ad litem is appointed. The guardian ad litem and this is, a lot of you may be familiar with this through the, a lot of people from, at least at our church I know, and I'm sure a lot of United Methodist churches get, volunteer in child cases as not necessarily the guardian ad litem, but somebody, I forget the name of it, but it's somebody who helps the guardian ad litem. And but it's the same thing in a adult guardianship case. A person is appointed as a guardian ad litem, and that person is supposed to basically do an investigation and tell the judge whether this person needs a guardian. And one thing we think is lacking is that we think courts typically just do full guardianship over people, where a lot of times a limited guardianship would be better. And it's in other words, you don't have to necessarily have, maybe you just need to help the person with their finances, not necessarily make all decisions about where they're going to live and that sort of thing. So next slide. So to close, I found another quote, bring it full circle, another quote from Bishop Tutu. And I really particularly like this when we're talking about people of faith being advocates. Frequently people think compassion and love are merely sentimental. No, they are very demanding. If you're going to be compassionate, be prepared for action. And then next slide. These are some ways you can get involved other than, I know you're going to talk about a lot of different things today, but these are some links to stuff that we do. And then next slide. A couple other things. Obviously, you're going to hear from the Interfaith Center, so you don't need that. But the first, something a lot of people don't know about is for VPAP, Virginia Public Access Project. We are really blessed to have this in Virginia. This is a nonprofit who, as it says, your window into Virginia politics, find your legislators, where to vote, political news, and you can get on their email list, and they send you every day a little summary of all the political news from all around the state. And it's just full of all kinds of really useful information. And I think that's it. All right, well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Jay. Katie, do we have a few minutes of time? Do we have some questions?
We do. I have a question from Margie Hernandez, and she was asking Jay, the housing bill that you were referring to, does it cover motels? Because there's a lot of people that live in motels in her area.
So motels are a tough thing. You know, that's become the go-to thing now, that there's so little affordable housing that a lot of people are being put into hotels or just defaulting to that. And we actually had the law changed a couple of years ago to try to include, you know, a lot of the hotel folks used to say, this is not, the landlord-tenant laws don't apply to us. It's a hotel, and we had the law changed. And I think, and I can't remember, sorry, this is not my area of expertise, but I think it's like, if you've been there 60 days or 30 days or something, then it becomes a landlord-tenant situation, and the law applies to you. And so I'm not sure if that answers the question, but yeah, it's a big issue, and we're continually trying to improve that, because this has become a big source. I mean, there are a lot of people living in hotels, and they should be, the landlord-tenant laws need to apply to these folks.
Thank you.
That was it for the questions. I think there were some people in the chat that were affirming, Jay, some of the things you were talking about and the experiences that they have witnessed themselves. So.
And we will make sure that you all get some follow-up information on some of the things that Jay had mentioned towards the end. For example, the VPAP and how one might be able to get onto the newsletter list so that you can get that continued information. Again, Jay, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to pivot now. We hear a little bit this morning on some of the issues, and we're going to hear some more on the issues from Kim Bobo, Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, in a moment. But what we're going to turn to right now is a little bit more of the foundational grounding. We as United Methodists have a call, not just to personal holiness, but to social holiness. And so I've asked a number of people to answer the question, why are we as Methodists called to the mission and ministry of advocacy? And to that end, I have 4 panelists, Martha Stokes, our conference lay leader, and then 3 district superintendents, Doug Forrester, Sarah Calvert, and Victor Gomez. And I am going to ask if we could to go ahead and start first with Martha.
Well, thank you, Karen. It's great to be with the group today. But I started my professional work career, I guess you would say, doing a graduate internship with one of our state agencies. And back a long time ago now, in 1984, one of my first tasks was to both work with the advocacy part of the Virginians with Disabilities Act, the very first time it was presented to the General Assembly, and then to also track it. What a great learning experience that was for me. It did happen to be the first year that the Virginians with Disabilities Act was presented, and it failed. That was also a big part of the learning experience for me, but it reinforced for me my understanding of our United Methodist, our Wesleyan heritage of putting our faith into action, to taking our beliefs and actually seeing them at work. And in this case, it was through the General Assembly and the work of advocates all around the Commonwealth. So I firmly believe, in my understanding of our United Methodist tradition and of my personal faith, that we're called to live out what we believe in the world very authentically. We're not called to sit back and be observers. We're called to take action, to put our faith and love into practice. We've always been known as a denomination involved with people's lives, with political and social struggles. Our Wesleyan heritage continues to call us to be faithful disciples in the world, to be in ministry with all people. And while that's a wonderful statement, we all know it's very demanding to live out every day. Legislative advocacy is just one way that we can and should be involved in living out what we say we believe. So for me, I find it hard to even think about things like immigration that is so much a part of our world today without remembering that Jesus's life began as a refugee, and that at the center of our Christian faithfulness to Scripture is this call that we've been given to love the sojourner. I guess it's why I can't think about climate change without remembering that John Wesley's emphasis on cleanliness and physical health came as he observed a land full of open sewers and impure water and smoke-filled air. He advocated for improvements in the environment, sanitation, and wider knowledge of the concepts of good health. So we should be at that work as well. You know, today's issues are different from those that were tackled by Wesley. They're different from the issues that were before early American Methodists, but there's still so many ways that we as disciples who call ourselves United Methodists can impact the world. And while we certainly don't all agree on all of these or any of these topics, at least our church talks about them. And we have this opportunity to be educators, to be advocates, to be change agents. And so I give thanks for that part of my Methodist heritage. And I give thanks for being connected. You know, it's so amazing to see everybody's faces on the Zoom today, but it's even more amazing to know how many of us there are that can be involved in this work, living out our faith, making a difference in the world. So as you know, Bishop Lewis started us, it's not that I'm one church member in the Richmond district all by myself trying to be an advocate. I am one of 335,000 laity and over 1,600 clergy in the Virginia Conference taking this work seriously. It's even more awesome to think that I'm one of 12 million or so United Methodists around the world that could really live out this call to social holiness and transform the world. And we can. It just takes our commitment to do that. So, Karen, thank you for letting the lay voice of the panel go first to represent so many of us that are on this call today. But I know my clergy colleagues and district superintendents have much more to add to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Martha. Doug, if I might turn it to you next. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, thank you, Karen. As I was thinking about today and thinking about getting to speak for a few minutes today, I was drawn to some quotes by John Wesley where he talked specifically about the kinds of things we're doing today. And one quote from his journal, he writes, "Oh, that God would stir up the hearts of all that believe themselves his children to evidence it by showing mercy to the poor, as God has shown them mercy. Surely the real children of God would do it themselves, for it is a natural fruit of the branch of Christ." And Wesley, in his own life, visited the poor in their homes. He learned what they ate, and what they wore. He witnessed the ways in which they actually lived, because he wanted to research the notion that everyone who was poor because of their own doing. And in his journal on February 9th and 10th of 1753, Wesley writes, "On Friday and Saturday, I visited many more of the poor as I could. I found some in their cells underground, others in their garrets, half starved, both with cold and hunger, added to weakness and pain. But I found not one of them unemployed who was able to crawl about the room." And this is the angriest thing I think I've ever seen John Wesley write. He writes, "So wickedly and devilishly false is the common objection, they are poor only because they're idle." And finally, there's this great story that Wesley tells in his journal on January 4th, 1785. He writes, "So on this, in the 4 following days, I walked through the town and begged 200 pounds in order to clothe them that needed it the most. But it was hard work, as most of the streets were filled with melting snow, which often lay ankle deep, so that my feet were steeped in snow water nearly all morning till evening." So Wesley spent days out begging in the snow for the poor when he was 82 years old. And, one of the things I love about Methodist theology and that I love about the life and witness of how John Wesley taught the faith was that saying that's in our discipline, that we don't believe in personal holiness without social holiness, and that we believe that the gospel must confront and redeem the sinful social structures that are present in our time. It's to do what we're doing today, it's just in our DNA, it's who we are, and it's one of the things that makes me proud to be a United Methodist. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Jay. And there is so much in our Wesleyan heritage and history that we really need to take to heart. Sarah, I'm going to turn to you next.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you inviting me. When I was thinking about this question, the biblical mandates that have been so much a part of all of our lives as United Methodists came to mind. My kind of the one that's always in my head is the prophet Micah saying, "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." And that doing of justice requires that we consider how people got into the situations that they are in. What are we doing as a society that is pushing people to the edges and pushing people into poverty and incarcerating people consistently? And so those are the kinds of things that concern me. I've spent many years as a recovering attorney. That was where God called me to first. So I was also a page in the Virginia General Assembly and got to see the inner workings of how that worked at a very young age. So that very much appealed to me, to know and to understand that things could be changed by our society, and to see that there can be a transformation and we can do justice, just as Micah called us to. I think we also have to look at the actual work that Jesus did. Walking, wherever he went, he would stop and he would be with those who had been pushed to the margins. Those were the people that Jesus went after. The shepherd went after the 1 and the 2 and the 3, knowing that the rest of the flock together could raise up healthy community. But without those on the margins, we have not done what we can to build healthy Christian community. And of course, as Doug has pointed out, the work of Wesley and things like the abolition of slavery and prison reform were essential tenets of the early and Wesleyan movement, to go not just to the prison every day, that's important, that's the mercy work, but to do the justice of saying people who are in debt should not be in prison because they are poor, and people should not be enslaved. Those were some of the central core things that our denomination did to begin its life and continues to do to this day. And I don't want to leave Mr. Spear with all the good Desmond Tutu quotes. So I'm going to close with my favorite, the one that I come back to constantly, which is, there comes a point when we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in. That is the work of justice. Why are people not in a healthy community? Why are people not able to support themselves and their families? Why are people incarcerated unfairly and unjustly? These are the things that I think all of us could pay attention to as Christians, as Methodists, and as inheritors of today's world that we are called to do justice in. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Making sure that we're looking for those who are marginalized and paying attention there. And then finally, Victor Gomez. Victor, you're up next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for this invitation. And thank you for my colleagues and also for Martha. She talked about the heritage, the Wesleyan heritage. So I want to thank you for all of you. No pressure to be the last one, but I'll do my best. I want to share with you, some people probably don't know, as some of you talk about your experiences, but for me, advocacy has been part of me. And there was a time when I was working as executive director during my time in ministry in a national association in DC. So I had the opportunity to advocate directly at Capitol Hill in Washington, DC, for migrant workers in the nation. And that was such a privilege to be able to do that. The other thing is that my demand is in public ministry. And this is something that I have learned a lot. And like I said, it's part of what I love in doing. And in my approach for advocacy, when I wrote my doctoral dissertation, it was on a social diaconia. And diaconia, of course, in the sense of serving those who are in need. And in the social diaconia, I like to have a holistic approach. And some of you have heard this from me before. But we all know the Chinese proverb, give a person a fish and you feed the person for a day. Teach a person how to fish and you feed the person for life. And I think that as churches, we are very good at providing the fish. And that's what I begin with the social diaconia, with what I call social services. We have food pantries, we have closets for, closets with clothing closets. I mean, we have all these ministries that we have been able to provide at the local level, at that communities, where we provide those social services. So we give the person the fish, but then we think about, we need to teach people how to fish, which is very important. And that's where churches also are good at that. We, what I call social education, in the sense of Sunday school classes, preschools that we have, ESL classes, English as a second language classes, and we develop all these things to teach the person how to fish. So we give the fish, which is good, and then we teach how to fish, which is really good. But then this is the challenge that I'm putting to everyone in terms of advocacy when we go into a holistic approach, which is what I call the social development. And that means that we need to have to provide the fishing pole, because we can teach as much as we want, but if people don't have the fishing pole, how are they going to fish? And we have programs that some churches are a little more hesitate, if you will, like a refugee resettlement problems, assist people with DACA, even to create a sanctuary for a church sanctuary for those who may need it. So all these things that will develop the person to be able to fish by providing the fishing pole. So we have, again, we provide the, we give the fish, we teach how to fish, and now we provide the fishing pole. But there's one more aspect that I think is very important, and where many churches, we really need to work harder on this, which is if they don't have access to the lake, if they don't have access to the water, if they don't have access to the ocean where the fish are, how they're gonna do it? We need to provide access, and that's what I call social justice in this, the diaconia and advocacy. What we are going to be doing today, what we continue to do in trying to make a change and influencing, like Bishop said before, that's what is very important. So that's why it's important as United Methodists, with that, as Martha reminded us of that Wesleyan heritage, to continue to do the social services, the social education, the social development, but especially and importantly with all of them, social justice. And I was going to close with that favorite quote that Sarah provided from Desmond Tutu. Actually, I took a class with him. I had the privilege, but I will leave it right there in terms to continue to provide that advocacy and be influencers where we are.
Thank you so much. I'm not ever going to hear that Chinese proverb in the same way again. Katie, do we have questions for our panelists? We have a few minutes. You are muted. You're muted, Katie.
We have one, this person asked, at a time when we are so politically divided along partisan lines, how do we help congregations understand that political advocacy is not a partisan matter, but a part of our discipleship that is not merely political? So do we have folks that would like to? Oh, and I got some more questions coming through now. So if folks want to respond to that.
So I'm going to open it up to our four panelists. Sarah?
Arn, it's interesting. I have taught Bible study for many, many years as a pastor. And one of the things I've noticed that is in studying the Bible, it becomes very clear what preferences God has for reaching out to people. I worked with a community where there was a great amount of division over the issue of immigration. And when we read the Old Testament together, when we read that God called upon Israel to leave the edges of their fields available for gleaning for those who were hungry and passing through, people to accept the immigrants into the community and make them part of the community, people understood things differently. It wasn't about us and them. It wasn't Democrat and Republican. It was, this is the Bible that we study from. And in here, following Jesus, following the Hebrew scholars, through their testimony of God's work in their lives, people came to see it differently. So one thing I would say is we study the Bible together, all of us, and we listen not to whatever news channel we want to turn on television, but what God has put before us. So I think that can be a very powerful motivator.
Thank you, Sarah. Any others of our panelists want to weigh in? Martha.
Lauren, I'll just add, I think there is still a lot of education for those of us in the pews that we need to have to learn more about who we are as Methodists. All of us talked a little bit about the connection with our Wesleyan heritage, and I don't think that for the majority of people sitting in our congregations, they really understand that history and that background. And so I think any ways that, whether it's small groups, whether it's through sermons, whether it's through other educational emphasis in the churches, we can never go wrong with talking about who we are as Methodists and our roots and connection to all of this.
May I add something? I think Martha is right on target when we talk about educating. I mean, we use the Bible, but we also need to use our social principles. And in our social principles, there is so much that we need to learn as clergy and laity together. And also, I like to use quickly Matthew 25 that talks about when ask when was I hungry, and when was I thirsty. And that is something that Jesus is telling us to do, despite of our divisions politically or not. This is what we are here to do as a church, I read Matthew 25, but our social principles are so rich in that as well.
Thank you. And for participants in your packet, you actually have a link to a PDF of the social principles, the 2020 draft. It's there, and we encourage you to read up on it. Katie, any other questions?
I will say there were a lot of questions that were around that first one that was very similar on, involving politics and advocacy. But Sean Gray also offered a question that was a little bit different of a vein, and asking, saying events like these are great, but how can we share with our congregations that this is happening, and how can we make it more of a part of our DNA as a Methodist church, that advocacy is what we do? So we will answer that a little bit. We're hoping that we give you tools to do that throughout this meeting. That's exactly what we're trying to do here, Sean. But I will leave it to the panel to also offer up different ways that we can help our congregations consider this as part of their DNA.
I had an experience once where I was having a conversation with a clergywoman colleague in the Virginia conference who I tremendously admire, about a congregation she served who said they no longer wanted to pay the Black College Fund apportionment anymore because they didn't believe in it. And she said to them, okay, I'll tell you what, I will help you write the legislation for General Conference to remove this as an apportioned item, but what I want you to do is work with me, and we're going to study the history and where it goes and where it came from and all of this. And they did this long, in-depth study of the Black College Fund apportionment. And when they got to the end of it, the congregation, the same people who said, we want to stop paying this, said, boy, we really need to make sure that we pay this now that we know what it is. So it all goes to what was said earlier about, I think we have to take the long view, and I think we really have to be intentional about educating our people. I don't know that we can, that any great thing is going to be created suddenly, but I think in an iterative process of education, and not just from the pulpit, but in our Sunday school classes and our small groups, we can help get people to where they need to be, is understanding this as part of our DNA.
I like what Doug did in bringing his daughter, inviting his daughter to join in with us today. And I think that's an essential piece of it as well, is to let our children see us do this, let our youth see us and understand us as full disciples of Jesus Christ, not just writing a check or sending a coat, but also getting up and finding out why and how people need our funding and need us to, to go find coats for them this year. Those are raising a whole generation behind us is a very important part. And we're missing generations in our churches. Many of us go to churches where there aren't multiple generations. So it is so important that we not only educate our adults as disciples, but we also invite our youth and our children to see and understand the kinds of things that we do and why we do them, why justice is so important.
And I saw Lori's quote in the chat, and Doug, you've actually embodied it, to invite our youth and our children to join us next year. So I challenge you all to look about and find a young person that you can bring with you next year. I am going to turn now to Kim Bobo. Kim is the Executive Director for the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. And we've asked Kim to talk with us today about some of the current bills that are before the General Assembly that we especially need to be paying attention to. And so Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Katie and Pat and Wenda and Laura and many of you who I work with on a regular basis. So thank you for your advocacy. So I want to go through the bills that you were sent fact sheets on and really talk about those. But I also want to back up and just sort of explain how we get to what we're working on. Because there are literally, as Jay explained, there are, more than 2,000 bills out there, right? So there's lots of bills. And frankly, we can't possibly work on them all. And there's obviously, some good things that are out there that we're not working on, and I'd like to be, but we can't. And you also have to start this stuff very early, trying to figure out where you're going to make a difference. And again, one of the things for us is always trying to, what are the issues that really are unifying within the faith community that our folks care about? What are the things that we would actually make a difference on, that we've got a shot at winning? So we're not wasting people's time. What are the things that will hopefully affect a large number of people? Again, if you have a choice over something small versus something large, could we do something larger? Anyway, so it's this whole mix of things that we're always trying to do. And honestly, for us, we were looking at this stuff last summer, and at that time, the House and the Senate was controlled by the Dems, and we had a different governor. And so again, not all of our stuff was quite prepared for who was going to be in leadership in the House. And so we've had to quickly pivot. Now, I can speak for VICVP, and I'm sure Jay would affirm this, like, our issues are often led by Republicans as well as Democrats. We are nonpartisan. We try to focus on the issues. And when the Republicans were in control, frankly, you only went with Republicans to sponsor your bills because the Democrats didn't matter. When the Democrats were in control, you frankly mostly went with Democrats because the Republican votes didn't matter. Like there's just some politics around this, but it doesn't mean that our issues are one perspective or another. That, like, we've had leadership on both sides of the aisle on all of our issues. And so it's really important to understand that. But I have to also say, there's always partisan politics, but it is probably worse than I've ever seen it in Virginia. I've only been here 6 years, but it's pretty bad in terms of partisan stuff. And so trying to navigate that it is complicated right now. So again, I will refer to that at several points as I'm going through some of the issues, but the politics are pretty challenging. So again, I'm going to go in the order that your fact sheets were sent to you, so that if you're looking at those, you can follow them. I also want to point out that on our Virginia Interfaith Center website, we literally put up a new bill tracker that is under the policy section, General Assembly policy section, and it's the first sort of drop down. It's a bill tracker, and it has all the numbers. It has where the bills are. So if you ever want to kind of quickly check, it's all there. And I have to tell you, I have to go look at it because I can't remember it all. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by this, like, you are not alone. It is just impossible to stay on top of all this stuff regularly. So let's go. So I want to run down them. So paid sick days. We've been working for the last couple years to get a basic, very modest paid sick day standard. The bills that we have tried to get are to get 5 paid sick days for the 1.2 million workers in Virginia who have no paid sick days, right? This is mostly workers in lower paid jobs. If you're in higher paid jobs, you tend to have paid sick days. It's workers in lower wage jobs. So for example, 2/3 of grocery store workers have no paid sick days. Half of childcare workers have no paid sick days. And these are all sectors that are interacting with people and often vulnerable people. So we've been trying to get paid sick days for the last 2 years, and United Methodists, and particularly United Methodist women, have been real advocates on this. We did last year get a bill out of the General Assembly that provided paid sick days for 30,000 home care workers. And as I said in the press conference with the governor where he was signing the bill, this is a down payment on a broader bill. Now this year, again, when the leadership in the House changed, people thought, oh, we don't have a shot at going for a full paid sick days. Let's see if we can extend it to a few more sets of workers. And so we have a couple bills. There's actually 5 different bills on paid sick days, but the 2 that we are supporting and like the most, one is by Senator Survell in the Senate and Delegate Candy King in the House. And these are bills that would expand paid sick days, the requirement that employers provide up to 5 paid sick days that people earn, right? They have to work to earn them. That it would be extended to grocery store workers, again, 2/3 of whom have no paid sick days, and to all healthcare workers. And about 1/4 of healthcare workers have no paid sick days. So again, this seems like a modest bill, an important bill. I think we have a shot at getting it out of the Senate. I do not think we can get it out of the House. And now, again, if we get something out of the Senate, it will go back to the House. It will give us another chance. But in the House, so the committee that sort of hears these things used to be called the Labor and Commerce Committee. They changed the name in the House, got rid of the word labor altogether, and now it's called the Commerce and Energy Committee. The Commerce and Energy Committee set up a new subcommittee, Subcommittee 4, that appears, when I looked at it, I was like, whoa, this is the killing fields. That's exactly what I said when I looked at the committee. And I went and talked to one person I know quite well, the head of the Black Caucus, who's on that committee. And he said, oh, that's exactly what that committee is going to do. It's going to kill everything. And so all of our paid sick days bills, as well as our bill on youth farm workers and tobacco fields, have all gone there. So I do not think we will get out of that committee. Now I am working very hard to see if we can, but I'm don't think we will be able to, and I hate to say that. So our goal right now is to get a really good bill out of the Senate and to use the opportunity in that committee really to help people understand the issues. It is that, one of the challenges on this is there is a perspective, not one I share, but there's a perspective that we just need to let the free market work and let, businesses do what they will. And it's not that people don't, I talked to a delegate yesterday who's gonna vote on this stuff. And he was like, well, Kim, I share your concern. Everyone should have paid sick days. That would be a really good thing. But I think we should let the free market work. And if people don't have paid sick days, then they should get more education and find another job that does provide paid sick days. And I was like, well, I was like, yeah, but there's 1.2 million workers in Virginia, 40% of private sector workers who don't have paid sick days. And he was like, yeah, I understand that's a problem, but we really, we can't add more burdens to business and mandates and whatever. And I just said, well, I think we have kind of a different view on that. And I respect your opinion. But I do think as a society, we need some really core standards. That's what the minimum wage is. It is a core standard. And so too in a society where we want people to be healthy, we all need at least a few paid sick days. But anyway, I didn't convince him, I'm sure. We left it. But again, that there is kind of this broader ideological question around, sort of the responsibilities in a society. And I actually think that's a place where United Methodist social teaching is pretty clear, that we do have some standards and we do have some expectations around caring for our neighbors. So again, that's paid sick days. Again, the good news for us is we are keeping this issue alive. And I think it is really only a question of time before we are able to get a paid sick day standard in Virginia. I don't think it's going to be this year. I wish I were. I hope I'm wrong. But I do think getting, some of you are going to meet with Senator Surville. This is the first year that he's championed the bill. He is one of the most respected leaders in the Senate. He's very influential in the Commerce and Labor Committee that he serves on in the Senate. We are so excited that he is championing it in the Senate for us. And so those of you who meet with him, just thank you, Senator Surville. We so appreciate it. Very important to sort of honor that he's kind of sticking his neck out on this one. So that's paid sick days. There's a very modest bill that Senator Lopez has introduced for several years that basically says that children who are working in tobacco fields need to have parental permission. Now, you have to get parental permission to go to the amusement park. We feel like if you're going to put yourself in a tobacco field, which is carcinogenic for children, that you should at least have parental permission. And so again, it's one of the bills we're supporting. It again has gone to that committee that looks like it's a killing field. I think we will not be able to get it out of committee. And it's just a shame, actually, because it's a very, very simple bill. All right, so then let me go to a place where I think we've got a shot this year, and I'm pretty excited about it. So that was kind of a negative starting point. So solitary confinement. The faith community is just 100% against the extended use of solitary confinement. The United Nations says that anything over 15 days in solitary is torture. That's what all of our faith traditions say. That's what the United Methodists, your sort of principles all say. So again, Virginia, even though they say it's not solitary, they changed it a few years ago to call it restrictive housing, and then they changed it to call it restorative housing, but it's the same thing. It's isolating a person by themselves with virtually no interaction with human beings. And no interaction with outdoors. I mean, it's really awful stuff. And it goes on. According to the Department of Corrections' own figures, in fiscal year 21, about 3,000 people were in solitary for more than 15 days. So, this is, and some were in solitary for more than 30 days, right? You already have a prison population where 25% or so have mental health issues when they go in. Imagine what happens when you lock them up in solitary for long periods of time. It clearly exacerbates all those mental health concerns. And all the studies show that solitary confinement makes prisons more dangerous, not less dangerous, more dangerous. And so states that have reduced solitary, now nobody has done away with solitary, but reduced solitary so that people aren't in there for very long. They found that there's less violence and they save money. Now, our Department of Corrections, last year we had a bill and it got killed because of money. The Department of Corrections said it would cost them about $40 million to implement the bill. They said they would need over 300 new staff to reduce the use of solitary confinement, even though at any given time, there's only 800 people in solitary. So do the numbers. Like, to reduce solitary is going to require you to have 344 new people. Anyway, obviously they didn't want the bill, right? If you don't want a bill, the way you kill it is you say it's going to cost $1 gazillion. That's exactly what happened last year. So this year, we have been really working. We've got a bill that has made it out of committee in the Senate. I think we've got the votes on the floor, and we are working it in the House. And we are gaining Republican support for it in the House. And it's really going delegate by delegate, having the conversations with everybody who's on the key committees. I think we have a very good shot at this. And again, we've got a whole memo debunking the costs on it. So again, I think we can go after that. So I think we have a good shot at this one. Again, nothing is done until it's done, but I'm very hopeful that we can get a bill out that would reduce the use of this torture in Virginia. And that's really our top criminal justice reform. Our secondary priority on criminal justice reform is called counsel at first appearance, and we've already been killed in the House. We might get something out of the Senate, but I don't think we will get it out of the House. So I think it probably won't go anywhere. Third area for us. So first for us is the economic justice stuff. That's the paid sick days and the farm worker kids. Second is criminal justice reform. That's primarily the solitary confinement that I think we're likely to get. Third priority for us is affordable housing. And I think we have a shot at this. Again, we are in, it's all things related to the budget. So anybody who's on the Appropriations Committee in the House and the Finance and Appropriations Committee in the Senate, we're urging you to talk with them about money for affordable housing. And it's really in 3 areas. One, to build more housing through the affordable, the Housing Trust Fund. Secondly, it's the rental assistance expansion that Jay was talking about earlier. And then third, we are completely supporting the proposal that Jay's team has put together around a pilot program addressing homeownership discrimination. It's being called a restorative housing program. We're excited about this policy and potential. I think because Virginia has such a budget surplus, there's so much extra money in Virginia right now, and because affordable housing is a crisis in every district in the Commonwealth. I think we have a decent shot at getting some of these budget amendments through. So again, if ever we were to have more money put into affordable housing, now is the time because there's so much money. Now, again, you've probably been reading in the paper, sort of the big fights in the General Assembly are really going to be around tax cuts, and how big are tax cuts and what are they going to be doing and will there be money to supplement it? Anyway, there's a big policy discussion going on around that I suspect will become very partisan. But our focus in the budget is around affordable housing, right? And again, it feels like that's the place that we can make the most difference right now. And then our fourth priority in the healthcare arena is really a training requirement for medical professionals, healthcare professionals, that they get trained in unconscious bias. You would think that this might be running into the crazy politics right now about critical race theory in schools and all the nuts stuff that's going on that, but it's not. We have found champions that really understand the fact that if healthcare professionals haven't been trained in unconscious bias, you see discriminatory practices against people of color in healthcare. And the Virginia Public Health Association has endorsed this. Cancer Society just came on because they say that the disparity in healthcare due to racism and unconscious bias is really one of the things that is causing the problems that we have in healthcare. Now, will some training help completely and solve all the problems? Probably not. But is it the most important first step we can do to address some of these disparities? Absolutely. It is an incredibly important thing, which is why we're getting unbelievable support, both sides of the aisle. Delegate Head, Republican, he was like, I heard a story about this on NPR, and I really think this is a problem. And then he started learning about it, and he has become an incredible champion in the House of Delegates for us. We have so he is the chief co-patron on it. And in the Senate, we have Senator Vogel, Republican, as chief co-patron. So again, bipartisan support on this. I think we have a very decent shot on it. The bill was originally talked about as implicit bias. We're now saying, no, it's unconscious bias. So, that it's not people are intentionally being mean to people of color, but that there's unconscious things going on, and that they need training. So it's a simple requirement that as part of their licensing that they have to get a couple hours of training in unconscious bias when they are recertified or up for certification. So it's a fairly simple bill, getting huge amounts of support. And we're very excited about this one. And then finally, on your list of fact sheets that you have, there's some crazy bills that we fought against in the past that are back with us. So there's a bill to get rid of the prohibition on guns in religious services. If this were passed, it would mean people could willy-nilly carry a gun into your worship service, even if your congregation said, we don't want guns in worship. Now, so like we've killed this bill multiple times, but it's back. But the good news on this one, it got sent to the Rules Committee. And frankly, I think what that means is the House leadership is just going to kill it. They're not going to let it out of the Rules Committee. So I don't think it's going to be a problem for us, but you do have the fact sheet on that one. So those are the things that you've gotten fact sheets on. There is, several people have asked me, there is a bill to stop the increases on the minimum wage, to freeze it. It will likely get out of the House. It will get killed in the Senate. And so again, I testified against it in the House, but I'm not really asking you to do much on it because I think I think it's going to get killed. So I think the minimum wage as it is will stay. So let me stop and see what questions people have, and
Yeah, Kim. So
either about the bills or the politics.
Melissa White has asked if solitary confinement has a House bill number yet.
It does. It just got it. Let me go to my bill. I can't remember all these numbers off the top of my head. So let me go to my bill tracker, which is on the website, which you all can go to as well. And I will get you the number. It is HB 1291. We think it will be heard on February 3rd. So a week from yesterday, or a week from today. Again, you never know for sure on bills when they're going to be heard until 24 hours in advance. I mean, it's one of the, in many other states, the legislatures meet for 6 months or whatever. They have a much longer time period, and so bills get scheduled out weeks in advance. In Virginia, where we only meet for either 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on the year, it's such a packed process that you never know when a bill is going to be on the agenda until 24 hours in advance. So it's, people always ask me, well, why don't you give me more time's notice on this one? Well, I can't, like, that's how it is. So,
Kim, Daniel Ray is asking, when we talk to senators or delegates, do we only talk about those bills that are in their chamber, or should we acknowledge the other bills? And I will say that we are providing talking points that you have provided for us, that those links so just keep that in mind, that they'll have those talking points to be more directed.
well, in general, you want to focus on the chamber they're in, and we often on our talking points will focus you on the committees that they serve on, because that's where you can have the most impact. In fact, I stopped by a senator's office yesterday and was talking to him about something, and he's like, "We're not on the committee. Why are you even talking to me about this?" I was like, "Okay. All right. Well, you're going to vote on the floor. Well, that's a long time away." Okay. So at this stage, things are generally in the committee stage. And so that's why we ask you to really focus on the things on the committees that they're serving on. Again, if bills get out of committee, then the votes on the floor will matter. The only reason to really talk about the bills in the other house or if they want to sometimes legislators will say, well, is there a companion bill in the House? And do you think you can get it? If you're talking to a Democratic senator, they're going to want to know, do you think you've got the Republican votes to get it out of the House? And so, you can say, well, we've got some Republican support on solitary and a lot of Republican support on unconscious bias. So you could mention that, but you don't need to deal with the bills, because they have nothing to do with those bills.
Okay, we have a question from Monty Campbell is asking, why are children working in tobacco fields?
Because their families are farm workers, and the kids help out. Or they're part of a team of folks that are working, and they get sent from field to field, and some of them get sent to tobacco fields. And again, part of what we want to do here is, I think sometimes parents of farm worker kids don't really understand how dangerous tobacco fields are for children. It's carcinogenic for everybody, right? So adults, I've talked to a bunch of adults who worked in tobacco fields, and they talk about the first couple of weeks just being so sick from it. But it's very dangerous for children. And so again, the dream would be to outlaw children working in tobacco fields, but we don't at all have the ability to do that. And so this is just kind of a modest first thing. Now it also says you don't, if you are a parent and it's your own tobacco field, your children can work on your own tobacco fields. Okay, so numbers on the other bills. So most of the fact sheets, if bills were available when we wrote on the fact sheets, have the bill number. But if for some reason it's not there, it's all on this bill tracking sheet that I mentioned that's on the Virginia Interfaith Center website.
And Kim, we have one more question. I know our time is running up, but Sean Gray is asking, what kind of influence a member of the legislature or General Assembly has to stop some of the executive orders that the governor has been issuing?
I'm not completely sure. I suspect they could do a bill to try to overturn some of them. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe if Jay's still on, maybe Jay knows on this.
He's no longer with us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what people can do.
On the Zoom call. The way I said that was sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Again, the executive orders were obviously pretty concerning on lots of levels, and have created all sorts of controversy. I have to tell you, like I said, the partisanship is much higher than I've ever seen it. And the way that it's most visible is, I would say there's 2, maybe 3 Republican legislators who are wearing masks. And almost all the Dems wear masks. And so you have this very, visual of, if we're Republican, we don't wear a mask. And, if we're a Democrat, we do wear a mask. And it just creates a very, I think it's just such an odd dynamic around all that right now. And how and when masks got to be so partisan is a little hard for me to understand, but it is.
Karen, we have a few more questions, but I think we are heading into our break. Is that right? Would you like me to do that?
Kim, I would, thank you, or Kim, Katie, I would, thank you. And Kim, thank you so much for giving us that great overview on legislation and equipping us to meet with our legislators. So yes, Katie, I'm going to turn it to you to give us our directions for break, and when we will be coming back, which is at 11:15.
That's right. We are giving you all a break from Zoom and going to have you come back at 11:15, but we are giving you an assignment during the break. So don't think that you are off the hook for this. You might be a little overwhelmed right now. There's a lot of numbers being thrown. There's a lot of terminology that's being thrown around. It can be very, very confusing. And who do you think it benefits that all of this legislative process is confusing? It benefits paid lobbyists and people that can keep track of all this. And we are very glad that Kim is here for us to help keep track of this stuff for us and help us feel like we are engaged. But it is a very, very complicated process. And next session, when we come back after the break, we are going to be talking about legislative visits. And this is a time for you to actually engage with your state senator, perhaps your state delegate. And what you are doing is you are making that House bill number with all those complicated words into a story. You're turning it into a person. Kim just talked about how influential it was for a senator to say, oh, I heard something on NPR, right? And now they're one of the biggest advocates for it. You are going to have the opportunity to turn this very complicated process into a face, into a name, into a story. I wanted to share that a few years ago, I was meeting with my delegate at the time, Dawn Adams, and I had some thoughts on the rate freeze bill. And I told her that as a pastor, the majority of the people who walked through my church was carrying a utility bill with them or a rent bill with them, or perhaps both, and saying, which of these do I pay? And because I shared that with her, she came up to me 3 months later at an event and said, Katie, I want to let you know I changed my vote because you told me that story, because I finally understood the impact that that bill would have on people. That is the opportunity that you guys are going to have this afternoon, a couple of days from now, when we've set up these legislative visits. So I know it's complicated, but it is so vitally important and it makes such an essential difference to us. So what we are going to ask you all to do is that Kim just went through that long list of all the different bills that are coming up. And we want you to think about the people that those bills are impacting. Are you one of them? Is a member of your congregation one of them? Is somebody that you engage with in your job or in your community one of them? Think about those people. And during the break, I want you to pray about them. I want you to put yourself in their shoes and think about how do they feel. Perhaps you would even have time to talk to this person before you talk to their state senator. And I want you to take time to think about them and think about their story. And this is the hardest part. And can you turn that story into a 30-second to 60-second story to share with the state senator or state delegate? And that is what we're asking you all to think about during the break. And we'll give you a lot more information on the logistics of how this works. between now and when we're done at 12:30. So we will see you back at 11:15. I know that Dwayne has asked us to please try not to sign off during the break. So you can just mute yourself and take yourself off of the screen because it's much easier to log in that way. So thank you all, and we will see you promptly at 11:15.